For our next 3 experiments, we're going to be measuring a couple of quantities. Up to this point, we've been using our DMMs just to measure voltages, and we've been using voltage as essentially a proxy for the amount of power that you're getting delivered to your circuit. So for example, that if I have more voltage, I have more power. Now that's still true in our case, but we're actually going to make a slightly more precise measurement of power by actually calculating the power. And to do that, we need to measure 2 different quantities. The first of the quantities is the voltage that we've been measuring up to this point, and the second quantity is current. And if you think back and you recall, current is the flow of charge, and it's measured in amperes. Now, fortunately, these are what we call multimeters, and they do the same. They can make both measurements, and there shouldn't be too much that you have to do here that's fancy. You might have one little bit of an issue that the meter will overload, and we'll show you what happens, what to do about that in a second. So the first thing I want to do is hook up my multimeter like we did before. So I'm going to use the alligator clips to hook up, and I'm going to hook up the positive to the positive and the negative to the negative. You may get a negative number, and that's okay. It doesn't matter in the end. Okay, so I have my circuit hooked up, and so the first thing I want to do is measure voltage. And if you remember how to do that, you go over to this side where it says voltage on our little thing here. And so if I turn, I always want to go to the lowest setting that still gives me a reading. So if I try to go down to this 2000 M, which we've been on before, notice I get this 1, which means I'm overloaded. And that means I just simply have to go up and go to the 20 setting. And so now I'm getting 4.01 volts. And again, if I cover my solar cell up, I can make that voltage go away. So I'm going to record that particular number in my measurement. And while I have my solar cell in the same place, I'm going to record a second number, and that's the current. To get the current, you're going to go over to this side of the meter. If you look carefully, you'll see something that says A, and it has 2 lines next to it. So this is the current reading. The setting we're going to want to go to is 200 M. So amps, it's in yellow, and you're going to go to the 200 M setting. So if I flip over there, I can see that I'm getting a reading, and I'm getting something that says 28.0 milliamps. This is milliamps, so it's 0.028 amperes, right? Milli is 1,000th, and so I take that number and divide by 1,000 to give amps. Now, it's possible that your setting will actually be that 1, which is an overload. So I'm going to turn on a second light, and you'll notice that I have an overload because my light's actually much brighter and it's giving me more current. What I'm really going to recommend is that you try to move your light a little bit further away or dim it in some way so that you get a reading. So if I just take my light here, for example, and I just turn it a little bit, I can get my reading such that I get a reading, but I'm not in that overload mode. If you're outside and this is happening with the sun, you might try a little bit later in the day when the sun's lower on the horizon. That will give you a slightly better reading. And again, the sun's the best way to do this experiment. But again, if you're in that overload mode, then you're going to want to just somehow dim the light, which you can do by moving the light slightly further away, turning it, whatever, and then you can go ahead and do the experiment. So now I'm reading 101 milliamps, or 0.101 or 2 amps.